All right, welcome back. Last week we spent some time talking about the concept of wellness and how it can be applied to healthcare. This week we're going to take a look back and understand how wellness has evolved over time. As usual, this lecture adds to the book's content. So to be best prepared for this week's quiz, I highly recommend studying both this lecture as well as the book chapter. All right, let's get started. Now, if I say the words medicine and healthcare, what do you think of? Many of us quickly think of doctors, prescriptions and pills, and a lot of really high tech machines and procedures. That is what medicine has evolved to become today. Now, if I say the words wellness or complementary alternative medicine, we probably start thinking of images that are far less technical, maybe less complicated, and for a lot of people, that means they're probably a lot less reliable. When we have a lot of high tech tools and procedures, many of us start to think of them as the normal, and anything less than that would be considered some sort of medicine man folklore. Well, we're not saying wellness is nothing but herbs and yoga, but we want to find a balance where we also don't try and address every single issue with high tech procedures either. So today, we're going to try and find that balance. And to show that all of these different types of interventions have their own place in healthcare, we're going to try and go all the way back to the ancient Chinese and Greek approaches to health and well being, and then show the evolution of the current system throughout history. Once we get back to the present day, we will introduce complementary alternative medicine and think about how we can approach wellness with a more well rounded and balanced mindset. So, to get us started, let's go all the way back with ancient China. So, thousands of years ago, the concepts of ancient Chinese health was driven by having a lifestyle built on balance. Having balance in the body was the key way to maintain your mental and physical self. The Chinese had no separate words for the mind and the body. Their vocabulary always referred to them as one whole organism, meaning that approaches to health addressed both of these at the same time. They focused more on energy. They emphasized energy so much that, unlike the mind and the body, they developed many different words to refer to all these different types of energy. In the diagrams on the right hand side, you can see that they began developing different channels or meridians of energy, and they theorized that there were about 14 of these different channels that the body used to move energy throughout the body. It was blockages or disruptions in those channels that were likely the cause of many different health problems. And so, to improve health, it was important to facilitate that flow of energy. Along with other forms of treatment, arts like yoga and Tai Chi developed as methods to move that energy from various portions of the body. It was a way to deliberately move the energy or remove those disruptions or blockages. Another key aspect of the treatment was reuniting the mind and the body. So think of a time where you might have been really nervous or angry about something. You might have felt like you were all up inside your own head and not particularly connected to how the rest of your body was feeling. Slow, deliberate movements in these different practices can draw that energy back out of the mind and into the body, and that reconnects the two. Yoga and Tai Chi, in particular, are notorious in our society for helping people relieve that mental stress and to relax. So let's move on from ancient China to a different culture and talk more about Native American approaches to health. Unfortunately, many people, when they think of Native American health, they probably picture a very overly dramatic medicine man. And that might be because of the different TV shows or movies that have exaggerated certain qualities for the sake of entertainment. But either way, the Native American approach to health was much like the rest of Native American culture, tied to nature. A core aspect of Native American health was finding a sense of harmony between oneself and the natural world. Individuals may have a natural illness like an infection or a more supernatural illness that would likely have a less clear, more spiritual explanation. In response to these, herbs and natural remedies could be created to address certain symptoms, while more spiritual approaches may have been developed to address the more spiritual concerns. Either way, modern research has recognized that well over half of certain traditional Native American herbal remedies actually have measurable medicinal qualities and are still used in many different ways today. Perhaps you can think of a time where you used a certain herbal remedy or maybe like an herbal tea to soothe some sort of ache or address a different type of concern. But moving along now, we'll start talking about the ancient Greeks. Now, if we were moving in order of time, the Greeks would have come much earlier in the slideshow, but their approach to medicine is very similar to the foundation for our more modern Western approach. So I saved them until now so we can move directly from their approaches into the more modern techniques we use today. When studying ancient Greek medicine, one of the figures you can think about is Asclepius, or the god of healing. He was a citizen that focused on improving the health and well being of Greeks and was later deified as a form of demigod for his work. You can get an idea for what he used as an approach towards health by studying his daughters, Hygeia, whose name closely mirrors today's word for hygiene, as well as Panacea, which means a heal all cure. So it was between the balance of both hygiene and having cures that led to many improvements in Greek medicine. So all of his approaches were built on observations of individual behavior, much like the modern scientific approach, and intervening with the whole person in order to improve their holistic health. One of the ways that Asclepius and the ancient Greeks tried to heal the whole person holistically was through the development of healing centers. These were usually facilities erected in the countryside, a good distance from town, where citizens could go to recover. Individuals who went to these centers received special diets, they had exercise regimens, as well as more traditional medical treatments and baths to promote physical health. But individuals also had access to amphitheaters and stadiums where they could enjoy some types of entertainment, which sounds pretty nice, right? Now imagine the modern hospital, because there are some ties here. Many of the times, these are also somewhat removed from the hustle and bustle of the city and have things like ponds and walkways lined with trees in a way of helping individuals escape the stressors of a large city. Here's kind of a blueprint or sketch of what the layout of one of these healing centers might have looked like here. Feel free to pause the lecture and look it over before moving on. So, we can see some of the traces of our current approach to health in the ancient Greek approach. Now, let's fast forward a few years to the rise of Christianity and take a look at how some of those early moral and religious values may have also acted as the foundation to how we approach health and medicine today. Early Western medicine was very much tied to your spiritual health. Individuals who lived by the rules of religion and had strong faith were supposed to be blessed with good health, whereas individuals who were not faithful followers were often punished or had their faith tested with trials and tribulations of illness and poor health. Either way, early Christians would open their homes to the ill and cared for the less fortunate. Oftentimes, these individuals would also seek help from their community churches, which acted as pseudo hospitals. You can see what this might have looked like in the image on the right. Fast forward a few hundred years, and we still have many hospitals that have religious ties either in their names or in their organizational structure. Many, if not all, of these hospitals have churches in them. A hospital church may exist for many different reasons, but it can be seen as a tie to some of the early roots of Western Christian medicine. And it is really that connection that put us on the path to where we are today. During the Dark Ages, a period of time that lasted about 1,000 years, there weren't many new innovations or breakthroughs in society. Things just seemed kind of to stay the same. Individuals still sought help from the church, which heavily focused on spiritual aspects of health, and it wasn't until the Renaissance that there was an explosion of science, art, and discovery. People started discovering different types of bacteria and certain medicines that would treat those pathogens. One innovator, his name was Rene Descartes, introduced the concept of Cartesian dualism, which led us to this next major step in the development of our current healthcare system. What Cartesian dualism proposed was a split between the mind and the body. You can kind of picture a tug of war between science and the church, where eventually society compromised and agreed that science was able to cure a lot of the physical issues and infections that people experienced, but the church was still necessary to deal with the more spiritual or mental aspects of healthy living. I tried to represent that divide here in the images, where a bodily issue meant you were to visit the hospital versus an issue that didn't seem to have a bodily influence, where it would become the church's responsibility. And it's that divided path that we've been on ever since. Now, if you fast forward a few years, in the United States, not long after the Renaissance ended, Americans experienced the Industrial Revolution. Now, in a different way, we experienced a boom in production and innovation that led to the specialization of tasks. For instance, if we were building the nation's first automobiles before the Industrial Revolution, one individual might be responsible for building the entire car, where afterwards, that individual might simply specialize in attaching the tires to the car as it moved along the assembly line. That type of specialization, where we only focus on one part of production, is an excellent comparison to what we started doing in healthcare. Healthcare providers were starting to specialize on certain bodily issues, and today we have individuals who perhaps only work on one part of the body, like the foot, where there's an entirely different specialist that focuses on issues just with the ear, nose, and throat, and so on. As a result of this, we developed an incredibly sophisticated medical system with all different specializations, and they all created their own new tools and machines that they could use to diagnose and treat patients. This means that they're able to also address and cure more complicated diseases and issues. And it's during this time where medicine started focusing more on bacteria, that separation of the mind and body, the specializations in the different parts of the body, that the goal of medicine was simply to remove pathogens or issues, and we started saying that if there were no pathogens or bacteria, then somebody was healthy, which now we know isn't necessarily true. And as you might expect, that brings us to the modern day and where we are in today's medicine. Here we can talk about what research has done to weave in a greater sense of wellness into healthcare and complement many of the advanced aspects of healthcare. One of the shifts we experienced more recently was moving away from a focus on problems. With so many healthcare providers focused on problems, eventually someone had to stand up and shift our focus, at least in part, towards solutions. You can imagine that if we only ever focused on our weaknesses, we might start forgetting what some of our strengths are. That is the rationale behind humanism, which is the third force in psychology, following Freud's first movement of psychoanalytic theory and the second movement, which is Skinner's behaviorist movement. Something many of you might be familiar with is Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which is commonly associated with humanism. At the top of the hierarchy is self actualization, a point where an individual is able to fulfill their greatest potential. We assume, in humanism, that everyone is driven to fulfill their potential, but they get caught up by not meeting some of their lower level needs. For instance, at the bottom of the pyramid is physiological needs like food and shelter. You can imagine that if you did not have food or shelter, it would be very hard for you to spend time thinking about fulfilling your higher order potential. All of your mental and physical resources would likely be spent trying to ensure your physical survival. Maslow said that it's only after we are physically sustained, safe, have a sense of belonging and esteem that we're finally able to fulfill our utmost potential. Think of how the World Health Organization stated that health was more than a mere absence of disease. Using the pyramid as a framework, people started viewing these individuals who become ill as people who had merely gotten off track with their physiological health in their pursuit of higher order self actualization, meaning health was leading us to something much more meaningful than just being not sick. So, if we know that people can live well and become self actualized, what does a happy and healthy life look like? Well, eventually, we started studying individuals who lived happy and long lives to see what types of things led to a high quality life. And the picture on the slide here is Ruth Frith. She didn't even take up sports until she was in her 70s, and at the age of 102, became the oldest competing athlete by participating in the Masters Track and Field Games. If you follow that link listed on the slide, you'll end up at a CNN report that talks about more people like Ruth, who, well into what we would consider to be old age, are living happy, healthy, very active, and meaningful lives. So, we'll talk more about this later, but eventually, the studies of these individuals who lived long, happy, high quality lives started organizing their findings by theme. Bill Hetler, a founding father of the wellness movement, has a model shown here that he created. Mel Whitmer is another researcher and a professor from Ohio University who also has a few models that we'll discuss in the coming weeks. These models will start to give you an idea of how we take those common themes from what research says makes us happy and healthy and start to organize them into different domains. It is what eventually leads us to having wellness assessments like the one you took for this class. One of the main outcomes of the recent movement is rediscovering that mind body connection that we lost with dualism. The research that drove this was largely due to the HIV epidemic, as well as the economics of expensive treatments that were starting to cost more and more money. Stress research showed us that anxiety or mental issues directly led to poor immune functioning. In other words, people who were stressed out were getting sicker and falling ill more often. That led us to the biofeedback movement, where people focused on helping others take control of their emotions, thoughts, and feelings that many of us today still feel like we have no control over, even though we now know that that simply isn't true. For instance, let's try a quick exercise. Wherever you're sitting, stop what you're doing and close your eyes. Now shift yourself so that you're in a more comfortable position in your chair or wherever you happen to be. Now, what I would like for you to do is to start to slow down your breathing. With each breath, try to focus on inhaling slowly and deeply, feeling your chest and belly lift and fill with air before you slowly exhale, releasing the air to start again. While you're breathing, think about relaxing the muscles in your jaw, your eyes, and the back of the head and neck. Each breath helps you feel those muscles relax and let those tensions slip away. From there, take a breath and focus on letting go of the same tension that you might be holding in your shoulders. Maybe it's in your neck, in your back, or your arms, all the way down through your fingertips. With each breath, repeat this and feel like you're focusing on now your legs and your quads. Breathing in, and as you breathe out, let the tension from your legs drift away. Work down your legs with each breath, all the way down through your calves, your feet, and your toes. Can you feel yourself relaxing? Take a few more breaths here and focus on how relaxed your body is, keeping your focus on those slow, deep breaths. I'll finish this slide while you continue to breathe. When we do exercises like this, we can feel ourselves slowing down our heart rate, feeling our muscles relax, and we can feel ourselves letting go of some of the stress and tension that we've been carrying around with us. Being able to shake that off physically boosts our immune system and can help us fight off bacteria and infections. The same thing happens when we let go of all the negative thoughts that we might have. A similar effect is felt when individuals attend religious worship. Many of those individuals who regularly pray and attend services experience similar relief from many of those concerns, as well as a great deal of social support that comes from their religious community. By now, I want you to bring your eyes back to the slides so we can move on and look at more of the damage that might be done to the body as a result of chronic stress. Keep in mind, we only stopped for about 2 minutes there to relax and unwind, and hopefully you felt a good deal of relief from it. It is important to note that stress exists even when we do things we enjoy. Exercise, for instance, is something many enjoy, however, it undoubtedly puts stress on the body. So does shopping or going on vacation. There is a healthy amount of stress that can keep us motivated to get stuff done and help us relieve tension, etc. It's only when we lose focus or control and start to experience chronic amounts of stress throughout the day that the body starts to experience some more negative changes. Feel free to pause the lecture here and look over some of these changes on this graphic I quickly pulled off Google Images. One way we can seek relief from stress and some of those chronic stressors is through the use of complementary alternative medicine, or CAM. In the past, individuals have called these ideas alternative medicine, which makes it sound like you have to choose between either seeing the doctor or an alternative practitioner. That's certainly not the case. So recently, the movement has been referred to as complementary. As we talked about at the beginning of the lecture, we're interested in developing a well-rounded approach to health and wellness. That means we don't want to lean too heavily on expensive treatments and doctors, but we also don't want to only pursue alternative methods. The two complement one another and help individuals improve their health more holistically. I've also included these charts here so you can get an idea for the growth of the CAM movement. You can see that of the $2.2 trillion spent on healthcare in 2007, much of it was covered by insurance. However, a good amount was paid for out of pocket. About $34 billion per year was spent on CAM treatments, which is about 1/9 of what people spent out of pocket for their total healthcare costs. The purple pie chart shows you what those out of pocket expenses typically include, and you can see that it's roughly split into thirds, with about 1/3 of CAM spending spent on seeing some sort of practitioner, like a massage therapist, etc. 1/3 being spent on vitamins, minerals, and other natural products, and the remaining third spent on miscellaneous CAM care. The chart on the right-hand side of the screen uses those same 2007 numbers to give us a better idea of what people are paying for with CAM medicines. One of the biggest expenditures goes to the $4.1 billion yoga industry. Feel free to pause the lecture and take a closer look at these graphs before moving on. And here we are today. We have our OSU wellness model shown on the slide here with all the different domains. Everyone in the class was able to take a short assessment that gives you an idea of what some of your strengths and weaknesses are, and we want to set some of those goals that can help you either raise some of those low scores or help you just focus on some of the things you're already very strong at. Either way, the overall movement is towards increased well-being and health. And, as we mentioned before, it's the same movement we're seeing across the country. All types of organizations and insurance providers are beginning to invest resources in helping people live healthier lives and prevent those expensive illnesses. The government is even starting to support the research through those Healthy People initiatives that we talked about last week in supporting a healthier future for Americans. So, in summary, by now, I hope that you have a better idea of how some of those ancient ideas have changed over time, especially with regards to the American healthcare system. Hopefully, you now understand how we might have started on a path towards holistic medicine in ancient Greece, but we might have gotten a little sidetracked through the Dark Ages, the Renaissance, and the Industrial Revolution. But now we're back to making our way towards more complete and well-rounded health. I definitely encourage you to look up more of different videos and classes, like yoga videos or relaxation tapes on YouTube. There's tons of free resources online, as well as maybe a couple in the course content for the week. Feel free to look around, let us know if you have any questions, and I look forward to seeing you next week. Good luck on your quiz.